today's developer experience. So what is it all about? Before that, a bit about myself. I'm currently working at as a software engineer, and we are hiring React Native, Vue, and all this JavaScript developer. This is one for now. So if that's you, you're keen on doing React Native and some JavaScript, talk to me. Right? So my journey as a front-end developer started as Rails in the Rails world, using Rails numbers and some jQuery. And then someone asked me to do a widget, and I actually use jQuery with classes, like the finance class and using that. It was so ugly. I didn't realize it was really ugly after I finished the project. But anyway, it's done. I handed it over. Then I got to the comfortable and using Backbone for one of the projects, which is okay until you kind of get the looping problems. This is listening to that, that's listening to this, and in the end, it just goes in circles. Then the other one, which is pretty nice, I think a lot of production projects to use it. And basically, from my perspective, after that, everything just exploded, right? Like, it's Vue, React, Angular, I don't know what number anymore. And I kind of just grew tired of learning new frameworks every year. And that's when I was wondering, is there something better to learning new frameworks? And then I heard about web components. And essentially, web components they comprise of two main concepts, being the custom elements and shadow DOM. So custom elements will allow you to write your HTML, you give your HTML tags a custom name, might do this, might do either, and also actually read it and understand it. So you can create any HTML tag you like, and the element itself is not powered by another framework or heavy library, it's powered by the browser. And the good thing about custom elements is that it's really good for UI projects, component projects, because it's lightweight and then essentially, I think this is what frameworks have been simulating for years. They are very much trying to do custom components, and we know custom components is now here in the browser, so we should use it. You call custom elements up to find, give it the tag name and the class name. So that's a brief 5-minute overview of custom elements. Shadow DOM is another with yellow. So with Shadow DOM, you can actually have stylings within your custom element, and the stylings will only be seen within the scope of that custom element. So in this case, my custom element here does not actually see the full color yellow in the global CSS. And you can define another full class with some other color, and basically this solves the global leakage of CSS problem, but of course that comes at some price. Finally, the browser is trying to solve the scope of CSS being global. Now you have scope styles. You don't have to employ hacks and tools or naming conventions to get your CSS to behave nicely. You also have less possibility of your HTML IDs clashing, because your HTML ID elements also are within the scope of that shadow DOM only. Okay, so those things led me to Polymer. So talking about my journey as a front-end developer, right? Started learning all the new frameworks. So Polymer was the forerunner of the day when I was starting to explore custom elements and web components about 2 years ago. So I tried out Polymer, and well, it's a bit weird because Polymer is like, they were using Bower and they were using HTML imports, but the world has moved on, right? And so they realized this, and last year they launched Polymer 3, which basically moves their API to NPM and keeps the same API. But even then, Polymer 3 Polymer is really a dead project. It will be in maintenance mode. Polymer 3 is there for you to upgrade your Polymer 2 stuff, but if you're starting a new project, don't use Polymer, and I'll tell you why. So what's the failings of Polymer? So Polymer tried to do a bit too much. They had tons of paper elements and tons of iron elements, and each element does one thing. Like your paper input, your paper tab, your paper button. Basically, it's material design. And while I tried to use their paper elements, I quickly bumped into edge cases. And the Polymer team, there's only like a dozen of them at Google, and they're probably too busy serving their internal client, which is YouTube, because YouTube is using Polymer, and probably they have prioritized YouTube's bugs over. But anyway, yeah, there's too many elements to support. Polymer team is spread too thin, and open source developers, maybe the mass is not there yet. Polymer is also a bit, the API is a bit larger and complex compared to LitElement, which I'm going to show you. So there won't be a Polymer 4. As I said, if you're starting a new project today and you are on the Polymer, the Google bandwagon, then you would use LitElement. And it's quite easy to actually refactor your Polymer 3 stuff or just Polymer 2 stuff to LitElement. I've actually tried doing so, and it was much more enjoyable. So now we talk about LitElement and what it is about. Essentially, it's a ultralight custom element base class. So you would extend class, whatever name you like, extends LitElement. Let's take a quick look at the demo. And so in this case, it's a clock. But it's actually re-rendering the clock every second. And we can take a look at the code of this clock. People see it? Okay, so basically we are importing LitElement from the library. These parts here, we construct the minute ticks and the hour ticks, and they basically don't move much. They don't move, right? The minute and hour ticks don't move. So you have your lit clock, or whatever name you like, extends LitElement, and there's a properties object. In this case, it's an internal property, so there's an underscore. And on construction, you create a new date, and every second you write the date. And LitElement will have a render method that takes the property that you've seen here, and then it will just basically re-render the clock. And it will do it in a performant fashion, so it's not doing a lot of repeated work. So you can see that the date goes here, and here basically it's trying to calculate the transform or the angle of the hour hand and the minute hand and the second hand. And there you have it. The magic happens in this HTML tag function here, which I will show you what it is all about. So under the hood, LitElement actually uses another library. LitElement uses another library called LitHTML, and it's the rendering library behind LitElement. Okay, this is straight out of their marketing tag name. Efficient, expressive, extensible HTML templating library. All right. Okay, so we need to explore some JavaScript fundamentals. So basically, this is string interpolation, right? You have a const name, and then you interpolate name into the string, and voila, hello IOKL. Sorry, I didn't change the name, it was KLJS. Right. So this is string interpolation. Everyone gets this, right? Next, we have tag template literals. In this case, let's say you want to have a function tag. It takes this string interpolation But instead of printing out that item is 101, it will somehow figure out that, oh, it's expensive, and print out that item is expensive. So this is how you would write your tag function. This is an array of strings that are surrounding the holes in the string. Oops. Alright, so that item is this part and the part after that. And basically, the second argument will be the value of price itself, and you can decide for yourself whether it's expensive or cheap, and then construct another string to return. So this is what a tag template literal is, and this is the magic behind LitElement, which you have seen just now. And so if you actually copy and paste this code into your browser right now in Chrome, probably not IE, it will work. It will print out that item is expensive. So this is just JavaScript. No fancy technology like JSX. Okay, anyway. So LitHTML provides two main exports. Sorry, it's going to be a bit, this is a bit theoretical. So exports HTML, and the HTML function will return something called a template result. And it also has a render function which renders the HTML, the template result to the DOM. Let's see an example. So this is still in LitHTML, not LitElement. So you have HTML and render. You create your template. All right, you give it an argument and it takes an argument to create a template that returns a template result, and you give the result of that to the render function and tell it to hook on to some DOM. All right. If you tell it to render again by calling the render function one more time, it will just update the part in the string that changed. So that's the high level overview. Updates are fast by creating the static DOM once. So the first time it sees the template, it creates it once, and then it only updates the parts of the DOM that need to change after that. So again, no virtual DOM, alright? Just JavaScript. So supported types in LitHTML, it definitely supports the template result itself. You can also create a div and just chuck it into the interpolation. You can also throw an array at it, and it will basically just print out in sequential order. You can also give it a promise, and it will print the result of the promise into the template. If you want to set HTML attributes, you can. Just basically, it's like a string interpolation. Conditionals, you would do it with a ternary operator like this. But if you don't like this, or you have something more complicated, you can actually construct your template outside and feed it in. Because essentially it's just JavaScript. You can just construct it outside and feed it in. Loops, we have covered a bit just now. Basically, you can map stuff, or you can construct your templates array outside and feed it in. That's also fine. There's also this thing called directives that allow you to do some more advanced stuff, and it comes with some built-in directives. For example, the repeat directive. If you have one huge array of 1,000 items, how does LitHTML re-render efficiently? So you need to help it here. In this case, the repeat directive takes the array. It also takes a function that returns the ID of the array and of the ID of the item. And then, yeah, this is where you return your template. All right, so that's one directive. Another directive would be, say, while fetching, show some other text. All right, so until is another directive that's provided by LitHTML. So far we have seen HTML. It's largely unopinionated. It's just HTML. It's just JavaScript strings in HTML. But for more power, there's this thing called lit extended, which is a bit more opinionated because of the syntax, but it's also built on top of lit HTML. So with lit extended, so let's say your custom element, my date field, has a date property. So this is how you would set a date on that date property. So this syntax is actually changing because in HTML, okay, let's skip that part. This is how you set a property for a custom element. This is how you would set an attribute in your custom element. So let's say you want to set your class. You need this $sign here to tell it that it's actually an attribute, an HTML attribute. So this is not so nice because this is not HTML, right? Class $, it's not HTML. But the syntax is actually changing. But this is how it is right now if you actually npm install. So set a class. So some HTML attributes don't have values. For example, disabled. Disabled can stand alone by itself. You don't need to write disabled equals disabled. So in that case, you can use this question mark to indicate that it's a Boolean attribute. You don't actually need an equal something after that. Does people get this part? Okay, so some attributes in your HTML, they don't need an equal string value. So they just stand alone by itself. So this is how you do it. Event handlers. So lit extended offers on-event name, and you pass in the function directly. So this is just JavaScript. The part you see here is an arrow function. The part you see here, function bound to this, it's just JavaScript. So you can do it however you like. So breaking news is while I was preparing the talk, this came up. All right. The syntax is changing, and for reasons that I told you just now, the current syntax is a bit weird, right? If you write this in normal HTML, you shouldn't need the $sign, the ID $sign. So the proposal was to change it to this, and so that the HTML attributes won't need any special indicators. The properties will actually have a dot in front of it to indicate it's a property, and then all the indicators will basically come in front for consistency. Question mark comes in front, and instead of on, they're proposing this add syntax, which view lovers would like. So I think this is already merged to master, so it's coming soon. So what if you don't like the syntax? I don't like the syntax, can I write my own? And the answer is yes. There's actually someone who actually wrote lit HTML syntax to follow the Angular syntax. So I looked at it and it's 44 lines of code. So, but I guess you need to know a bit more of how lit HTML does it. Okay, I don't like lit HTML. Can I use my own renderer? In theory, yes. I just haven't tried it out. And that's part of the reason why it's called _render, so that you can actually bring in your own render from React or Preact. So basically, it's a base custom element class. Bring in your own renderer if you don't like it. But I haven't actually tried it, and I don't recommend it. So the advantages of LitElement is there's nothing special here. It's just JavaScript. Again, seamless access to data. Because everything is just JavaScript, you can just, your templates basically see everything, right? You can import a function and you can use it in a template directly. I think in Vue you have to declare your method first and then use it in a template. So there's no need for all that because of it's just JavaScript scopes. It's just JavaScript faster evaluation. You don't need to ship a parser to the DOM. You don't need to ship a VDOM parser to your browser because it's just JavaScript. No VDOM overhead because it's just JavaScript. CSS compatible syntax because you can actually write your CSS within the style tags. And yep, in theory you can extend to whatever syntax you like. So LitElement uses lit extended out of the box. So let's take a look at LitElement. How do you do certain things? So this is how you would declare your properties, and then your property gets fed into the render method, which then you can use to render your template. So this is the basics. Alright. How do you set a default property? Alright, you do it in the constructor. Give it whatever you like in the constructor and use it. What if you want to have a computed property, a plus b? You can do a getter in the class, it's just JavaScript. Or you can do it in your render function and internally compute it before using it. I want to observe the property. Has it changed? So LitElement offers a didRender callback that has a list of properties that change. So in that callback, you can observe change properties. There's another way to do it though. You can have your property be internal, and then you have a getter that wraps around your internal property. And in the setter, you can observe your property. It's being changed. So again, just JavaScript stuff. How do you get element by ID? So I'm assuming you're using shadow DOM, which is the default. You can actually just do this dot shadow root dot get element by ID and assess the ID. And there's nothing to do with whatever is out there. It's all, you can only see IDs within the scope of this element. Okay, so Shadow DOM does pose a bit of challenges. I'll show you later. But if you don't like Shadow DOM, you can actually just turn off Shadow DOM. Admittedly, not a very nice way to turn it off, but this is how you turn it off. And the API is actually pretty small. We have seen these four already, and there's only a couple of others that are worth mentioning. First rendered, call out the first render, render complete, turns promise that resolves after the next render, and so it's a pretty lightweight element to build on top of. Wow, it's great. Why isn't the world on fire with LitElement? I don't know why, honestly. Maybe because it's browser support. You know, it's IE 11, H17, it's still red. Shadow DOM, same story. But the fact is, Web Components has won, and the browsers will implement. They will be coming soon, if they are not there already. But for now, there are polyfills to help you bridge the gap. And here's a recommended polyfill strategy, which you can go and read later in the slides. And YouTube actually uses custom elements in production, but I don't see that they use Shadow DOM. Maybe because it's a bit tricky. I'll show you why Shadow DOM is tricky. Yeah, so you are in good company, but maybe people are afraid because they are not Google, they don't have Google resources, and this seems a bit foreign. And maybe another challenge is a lack of JS-only compatible libs, right? Compatible libraries. Because I'm building my app in LitElement, which is light and very lightweight and fast, I don't want to pull in a React Native library, a React material or Angular material that fits the purpose. So a lot of component libraries are built with some heavy library which I don't want to use. So maybe so you have to write your own components, which isn't too bad, or you have to write wrapper components over current libraries. if you want to try out the Google's material design implementation, you can head on over to this. It basically wraps their JS and their JS material design implementation into a custom element using LitElement. It actually uses LitElement. And because forever, since the beginning of time, the only way to hook into the DOM is maybe document.body. But now that you have Shadow DOM, you don't actually want your JS library to look for document.body. And so, for example, if I was shopping around for date picker libraries, and some date picker libraries just conveniently hook onto the document. But in this case, it's a Shadow DOM. I don't want them to grab anything out there. So maybe you need to raise pull requests or fork the library and change it yourself. So it's a bit of a pain. Okay, Shadow DOM. Why is Shadow DOM probably a pain for you? Let's say you have a bootstrap file, you import it in your global, and then you want to use those classes in your DOM, in your Shadow DOM. You can't. It's Shadow DOM, right? You can't see the thing you imported globally. So, alright, maybe I'll include the bootstrap file and each of my components. Yes, it works, but in most browsers, they are actually doing a lot of work reparsing your CSS. So it's very inefficient, but the spec is there and it should work maybe 10 years from now, but now it's not working. It's not going to be very efficient, alright? You can't duplicate your CSS everywhere. So some solutions is, what I do is, I write shared utility CSS files and import them as needed. I will show you an example of this. You can try out Tailwind CSS, which offers CSS, class-based CSS. So stop writing CSS, use their class utilities to style your element. But anyway, I'll leave you to Google what Tailwind CSS is. You can declare CSS variables. Again, this is not Sass, this is CSS. So CSS variables declared at the top scope will penetrate down all to the bottom. Or you can turn off Shadow DOM. I already taught you how to turn off Shadow DOM. Okay? But this is what I do in my project, which is not at work because it's a personal project. So you can define your utility classes that do one thing very well, and you can import them to your component, and then you can use those classes in your DOM. And if you break up your utilities well enough, it will be pretty lightweight. And yeah, this is how I do it right now. And so far, so good. Okay, so LitElement is just a component, right? It solves the component problem really well, but doesn't solve a lot of things. How about state management? How about routing? How about other things? So you can check out the PWA starter kit for useful patterns. PWA starter kit doesn't use Webpack though, they use a Polymer build tool, which I don't recommend. Try to just rip out that tool and put Webpack in, because I find it easier to use Webpack. So the good news is you're not going to be a weirdo in the JS world. You can still use Webpack. And of course, you should always use the browser. If you're using emit, you should just use custom events. You can, for routing, you can use the history API and push to your path and all that. Of course, there's npm lens solutions, but be careful of fattening up your app. So this is a look at the PWA starter kit. They're all built in LitElement, and they offer some solutions and patterns that you can study. They use Redux, so they basically use Redux for state management. It's not yet 1.0, but you have been warned. But fairly stable API. I'm using it in one of my side projects and another one in the works. So yeah, I think it's okay. Resources here, I'll put up the slides. Okay, I think I have time for 2 questions. Anyone want to ask anything? It's the same reaction I got from that day. No one want to ask anything. Okay, so yeah, I know this is a bit of a hard sell. Everyone's like, so imagine a world where frameworks didn't need to exist because the browser was good enough. So I think this is a glimpse into that. But of course, it's JS. I mean, everyone will continue to do everything that's possible. So I wouldn't say this is going to take over the world, but it may make your life nice if you might actually enjoy it better. And so I would encourage you to just spin it up and give it a try. Okay, thank you.
So the next talk going to speak is technically an AE system applied intelligence. We're going to talk about building a daily style guide in Storybook, React, style components. So let's welcome Quinn.
Okay. Alright, great. Okay, guys. And I love those 3 things. That's kind of like my journey, how I arrived at style components. So I began JavaScript at the end of the 90s, with, basically vanilla stuff, vanilla JS. Then it was jQuery, Backbone, Angular 1.6, and then it became React Redux. I have, I do not like Redux. It's a messy framework and it should not be used. But it served its purpose when it was there. It was needed. Then I went into one week of Vue. I really what I loved was the fact that it had scope CSS. The CSS was there. It was part of the same file. You don't need to edit 2 files and stuff like that. But then I discovered MobX. Then I discovered style components. So I'm back in React and style components now, and I love it. So very sorry. Earlier I was debugging a server from hell, and that's why I was delayed in the office. But hopefully I'll be able to run you through. I did an npm install in the office for a very old version of Node, and now my yarn install does not work in the laptop. Anyway, so I'm going to start off with what Storybook is, right? When I was working with John, it was a great experience. Oh, hello. Yep. Okay. So we built something similar to Storybook because we wanted somewhere where we could put all our components, and you could basically choose which component, and you could see it and click on it. You can play with it. So the layout was very similar to that. On the left, you had a list. Click on it, and then it was rendered. But that was with Angular 1.6. However, let me just show you something. If you come to the Storybook.js website, that pretty much explains what it is. So on the left, you have the components, and you can click on a certain component, and it even shows you what happens when you click on, when you interact with the component. At the bottom here, it's going to give you a little bit of instruction. So you might just think, hey, this is a React-only component, but actually, let's come to the Storybook GitHub page where the documentation is much better. Now, all right, let me know whenever the font size is a bit too small or anything. But as you can see, those are the frameworks. Hey, no, wait, go up. Those are the frameworks that are basically supported by Storybook, and it works pretty much. It works great with React and React Native. I'm using it personally in a React Native project as well that's built on Expo. If I have time, I'll show it to you. So right now, I'm just going to quickly show you how it looks for React Native, because you're probably wondering, hey, that's a mobile device. How does it even work. So you have Storybook on your left in the browser. So whenever you change components, it actually auto changes inside your emulator. Okay, I'm gonna come back. All right, now let me get a show of hands here. Who uses style components? Yes. All right. Okay. Cool. At work?
Yeah,
Okay. Great. What do you think of it?
I love it.
Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. Now let me just continue. Style components has all these add-ons as well, right? And hopefully after I show you how cool it is, John will stop using lit or whatever. But yeah, let's move on. So we use a few of these add-ons. For example, Jest. All right, there's a very, very nice, beautiful GIF there for you to see. So, you're writing your code at the bottom here. You're not running your Jest tests anywhere, but Storybook has a panel on the right, and it's actually showing you what tests are passing and what tests are failing. So, you don't need an extra terminal window. It's pretty cool. And yeah, so let me just go back. We also use GraphQL. We use and the coolest one is knobs. So knobs has the best demo. I'm gonna go to live Storybook, and this is basically Storybook with all the components on the left. This is like just a live thing that you can play around with. Now React Components has props, right? So the beauty of React is that it's so stupidly simple, but intelligent at the same time. So you change the prop. If the prop you detect a change, if the state changes, it renders. That's it. All those 5 or 6 lifecycle methods are like now shrunk down into 2 or 3. So that's something also that's nice. So the props of any component, you can actually use Storybook knobs to play around with the props and how the component changes when you change the props. Now I'm going to change this storyteller like that. You can see the component updating live. So that's pretty much it's great. So then you can change these things, and that changed the lime. So you can basically play around with the props. Let's change this. Oops, I think there's a color picker. It's not working. Right, so you can even add more items like that. So you're not going to press Command S anymore. Like, you can come here and you can play around with it, and all this can be deployed online, and your team, instead of running their the Storybook themselves on their local server, you auto build it using your build system, and it's somewhere in your intranet or on a remote server, and they can come and play with it. Not only that, the UX guys can come and see what you've built as well, and they don't need to look through emails with JPEGs and PDFs and stuff like that. All right, so it's great. And so I've had an instance where the UX person that says, like, you need to increase the padding here. He played around, and then he basically gave me the new figure and things like that. So let me just continue further. Okay. That was knobs. It should literally be included in the default installation of Storybook, but well, okay. There are other ones like story shots that we use. That's just like if you do snapshot testing in Jest, you can actually you don't need to write separate snapshot testing. This does it for you, and it's pretty cool. So when you I'll leave all the links in the Facebook page later, and you can just check it out. All right. Any questions so far? Why Storybook? Okay. Well, it's a component library. So let's say you how many? Okay, are you building any app right now? Okay, so are you having a file that are you having a component for the button and a component for, let's say, the list or the table or whatever? So you have various components, right? Now you can open up the app and test it there, and then you can use a console.log somewhere where you can see how the props change and whether your application doing it. But if you use Storybook, you always have it running where you can, even before you add it to your app, you build a component, you don't need to go into your app into the, click here to page 3, and then see whether the component's there. So you can actually test it standalone. You can give it all default props and stuff like that. It will just, it should be a standalone component that renders in Storybook successfully before you should even add it to the app, right? So I hope that makes sense. Cool. Okay, we'll talk later, and I can explain it further to you. Okay. All right. So let's continue. All right. All right. Now, I hope nothing breaks because it's very temperamental today. So this is, as soon as you follow those instructions I gave you on the screen, and you run Storybook, I'm just going to show you the folder structure. Storybook creates a thing called stories in your src folder, the source folder, and it gives you an index.js. Now, basically what this is doing is that it's just saying, hey, I've got stories off. Stories off does this. I'm going to bring this up here. Okay, so stories off gives you basically an accordion title, the button. So you can have many stories for one component if you need. However, we don't, in our company we don't have multiple stories because we use knobs. I just showed you the knobs, so you can play around with knobs inside the thing. So for right now, this is the default installation. We don't have knobs, so you can create multiple copies of the same component with different props. I hope that's making sense. All right, so now if you look at this, you're basically creating stories off, and inside there it accepts a component, and that's your props, right? You can use any React component. Now, app.js, which is pretty much this is I've made some modifications, but I'll show you what this app does anyway, and you can see where I'm getting it. So is it this? Okay, so let me just log out. So I just built this little shopping cart kind of thing, and it has so many components. So about 4 or 5. So I'm just gonna log in as a company, and when you click on certain items in the shopping cart, it updates the price. Sometimes there's like special discounts and stuff like that, so it calculates it like. So I have 2 buttons here. Now I'm just gonna show you. All right, so I'm just gonna change this. Okay, sorry. All right, I've added this thing called app at the bottom. It's just that, and then say add. Okay, just like you can change that. All right, now there is no one click, and that will be a self-closing. All right, so I'm just gonna save that. There is a built-in Webpack server that comes along with Storybook. And what the hell happened? Okay, sorry. Wait, let me just go back there. Oh, that shouldn't have been there. Okay. Okay. Is that gonna work? We have app. All right. Now, what do I see there? That's because it's just a component. You can see it running in Storybook. And there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with the add-ons if you add it. So that is Storybook at its most basic. Can I move on to style components, or would you like me to show you anything more with Storybook? Oh, okay. All right. Cool. Okay. Cool. I wish my installation was working, but I could show you some really cool stuff. Right. Let's see. Well, you can see it here. This is basically your component library, and you have a search box, and you can go like that. If there's any events, this is not been programmed properly. This is the live thing. Okay. Okay. Cool. Let me just create a new story for that button. I think that would be great. All right. So let's go to app.js and find out where that button is. I've got components. I've got here the login and index. So, okay. Now, as you can see, I have created something like a little style guide for myself. Right now, I'm going to show you that style guide. Where this is the style. And don't worry about style components. I've not gotten there. I've not explained that yet. But it's basically exporting a few components here. Now I'm just gonna sort of have button clear there, and I'm just gonna go to the stories, and I'm gonna change this to button clear. I use an auto import thing, so you can see that it's added on top there. All right, so let's see whether this works. I think it's okay. Hey, stories off button clear. Oh. Hey, I think it's, sorry. Again, you can add that as a prop. That's a clear button there. So I just imported a component and I put it on a story, and it adds its own. You can just add a component there. You can have pages of just one component, or you can actually like have see how multiple components work together, like a toolbar. So you can have one page for the button, then you can have one page for the toolbar with the buttons inside. So it depends at what level you import it in. Okay, now that is storybook.
In the storybook, okay, so this whole directory structure is for storybook, right?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So this whole structure, the directory structure,
yeah,
is for storybook.
Well, what?
Or is it like inside the app? So inside the storybook part, is it only inside the stories folder, and the rest is basically the rest of the application?
Yes. Okay. So you know what? Okay, I have this for you. Okay, sorry for using somebody else's video, but it's just I'm just gonna show you like 1 minute of it. Now, who bootstraps their React app using Create React app when you're building a Create React app? Okay, cool. Now this guy, basically what he's doing is I've switched off the volume so I can use my own voice, and so yeah, and so he's creating an app called Playground, and once you do that. Okay, done. So you go inside the directory, and you basically press. I mean, you just type. Okay, you can use that, but there's another command on the website. All right, so I'll just pause it right there and explain. You can see adding storybook support for your Create React app based project. It kind of knows what kind of an app you're using. Even if you don't use Create React app, it's not that hard. But it's a bit convoluted and everything. So it even, and also, let me show you. Okay, let me just proceed. And once you do that, you have storybook that's added. So that's got its own webpack config and stuff. And that's the add-ons where you can add the knobs and all that. Then, okay. And you have your stories folder. So this is new. So the installation does this for you, and it gives you the basic story. Other than that, it's the structure that you had before. So it's nothing. It just adds another folder, I guess. It also has its own little Webpack installation. So it's not using the same Webpack as your main app. So you can have, it's just, you can keep it separate. All right. Okay. Cool. All right. I'll give a credit to this guy later. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, do you normally add storybook to your whole React application? Would it add loads to the React app?
No. No, but because it's running on its own Webpack instance, so it's not using your React scripts. Like, you know, when you use create React app, it's running on it's running create React apps Webpack config, right, using React scripts. Now Storybook is it runs on a separate thing, a separate port, and you know, I'm just going to show you my terminal. Okay, so on the left, I'm doing a yarn start, which is just going to start up your React app. And that is the React app I just showed you here. I'm just going to log out, and that's, okay. And yeah. So on the right, hey, all right, I'm going to run yarn run storybook. Now this is a command that's added to your package.json after you do get storybook, and you know, it does all this. Right? Now I'm going to run yarn start storybook, and it's gonna see, it's very different output from what you get from your React app. So it's got its own little Webpack thing going on. Sometimes you need to modify it, but most of the time you don't. All right, so I'm just gonna go that localhost. So that's here. So it's two different, you know, and yeah.
Do you find that it adds a lot of time to development, or is that like something that you knowingly take on because it provides better organization or overview?
So are you saying, like, do we use it in every project, or is it a judgment?
When you do use it for a project,
yeah,
does it increase time towards development substantially?
I think it actually decreases the because especially the ding dong between UX and the front end developers. It's more and I work with the UX team in London, and you know, this is like the best possible way to just like say, hey, just go play around with it, you know, rather than keep sending them a screenshot. So yeah, I think overall it actually reduces time.
Does it save time mostly between that layer of communication between devs and designers?
That's one benefit. The other benefit is that I don't have my tests running in another command window. Like, it's running on the sidebar of, you know, like I showed you earlier, the example with Jest. You can see the test right there. So I don't switch between windows. I also use Enzyme at work to do to test elements. You know, like if it's a button, if it clicks, you know, does the counter increase, or stuff like that. You know, I can explain more, but I work for like the world's second largest defense contractor, and I'm not supposed to say much of our projects, and I don't think I'm allowed to show you. But yeah, that's pretty much how I can explain it. It is a godsend because, like I said, when John and I were building a project before this, we actually saw the necessity and built something very similar to this, and it helps. And yeah, so that's kind of it. And also, developers who come on board, new developers, you can say, hey, all the components are there, you know, don't like it. So that's another benefit. I could probably give you about a lot more, and yeah, so you know, I'll continue later if you want. Yeah. Cool. Okay, yeah, that's it. How much time do I have? Another 5 minutes. Oh, it's so cool. All right. Style components. All right. I'll do a part 2 later because it's so cool. All right. Okay. Let me just. Is it? Will I? Okay. Is it too large? Okay. I'm just gonna go like that. Okay. So, style components is okay. John was explaining just now template literals, right? 5 minutes. Okay, I think I'm gonna do it this way. All right. Okay. Let me just go to the website. Style components is it makes me sleep better at night. Okay. Who's using CSS modules? No one? Good. Because the guys who invented CSS modules realized that it's another thing in the front end, community where it was patchwork. It was like, hey, we need encapsulated CSS and we don't want class names and we want it to be in the component and all that. So he came out with CSS modules where you import it and it becomes a JavaScript object for you. Then there's a lot of times when you make modifications to that JavaScript object, and if you know a JavaScript object, the key can't have a dash in it because it's it's not for example, this is a regular JavaScript. Okay, wait. Is there F ready?
5 minutes.
Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna go on and proceed to. Okay. So the guys who invented CSS module came out with style components, and this currently only works in React, but also React Native. Now, is everyone wondering what React Native? How do you have one code base where you can it works on the mobile as well as the browser without just because React Native has separate elements like view and text. It does not have H1s, H2s, and stuff like that. So you have two different code bases. But I think there needs to be a part 2. All right. So let me just come in. The cool part about style components is that on their website you can actually go in and play around. So this is actually editable. So for example, here you've given the primary to a button, and if you come here, style.button, that's how you call it, and this is a tag template literal, and it's just basically you're passing in what you already know. That is pure CSS, right? That is it, and you even have nesting like Sass, but basic stuff. Now, check out this part where you can go props, you just give it like a little function there, and you say if props.primary, you add this CSS. So you can actually play around. I'm just gonna go put the background as black, and that's a black background, right? So based on your props of the component, you can actually change the look and feel of that component, and once we have this in a storybook kind of level, you basically have all the logic inside how the component looks and works inside one file. And you're probably wondering, how do I take in? I've written so much existing CSS, right? I want to use that, So you can do this by, for example, I was too lazy to write the typography, create typography stuff for each style component. So I just basically wrote this in a string like that. And for example, there's global CSS as well. And I'm going to just show you, hey, all right, so I'm doing this in the app.js. So do you see the inject global there? That's how you inject any CSS like you already have. And so you can get yourself started with importing your entire CSS library like that, but slowly start externalizing your components, and you can have standalone stuff. And yeah, I think in the next talk I'll put them both together in Storybook, and you can see how really cool it is. All right, any questions? I think I'm thinking you can ask me the questions later one to one, but I think I need to go on to the next.
Can I take one more question?
Oh, okay, yeah, go on. Sorry. Any questions? Yes.
So this is a slightly different angle. I guess Storybook seems great, like on the face of it. But are there any edge cases or like any gotchas in your experience that you're just like?
For Storybook or style components?
Storybook.
No, it's the thing is, I'll just spend 1 minute telling you the history of Storybook. It was created by a company in Sri Lanka called Kadiro, and then like everybody just said like, why is this not, why wasn't this done before? And so everybody started contributing to it, it became a very messy code base and became a little bit hard to maintain. And so, but I don't know what happened, and they kind of stopped updating it a little bit, and the whole world started, contributing to it and made it better. So then they added React, Vue, and all these various framework support because people saw the necessity of it. It's still growing, and for example, there's a lot of the add-ons I showed you that it's a little bit of a pain to set up, especially with your ESLint config and stuff like that. But once you have one running instance of Storybook in your company, you can just duplicate that around. You don't need to really. You can just have like all the storybooks in our various projects are just copy paste. Yep. Yep. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Cut that out.
Most JS project use REST for your APIs. For anything that adopt GraphQL, here's why you should consider gRPC and protocol buffer for your next project. It's a top gRPC or web browser by Winnie Guy, full stack developer at blockchain labs. Thanks for coming.
It's okay, I'll just mirror the display. Okay, hey everyone, good evening. My name is Wei Jian. You can call me Wei. And today I want to share with you a little piece of technology that I've been using at my work, that is gRPC Web. So, before I continue with the rest of my speech, I want to first kick off this by asking, anyone here, like at the current moment, is not using any form of HTTP, JSON over HTTP or REST API? Anybody? Like, not even one. GraphQL? Yes. Okay, see, I know. It's like, so we can see, like, as of this moment, right now, HTTP over JSON over HTTP or REST is upon us. Everybody is using REST APIs for good and bad reasons alike. Maybe there's lack of choice, but here's something that I want you to consider for your future projects, because we've been using it at work and so far it's been pretty nice. Okay, so I'm gonna start with a customary self-introduction. So I'm a full stack developer at Blockchain Labs. I was first hired to do Golang development, but because we're short of like front-end developer now, I'm doing some React stuff. And that's because like I was doing React in the past, and if I haven't made it clear enough, like I'm on the React vanilla JS camp. Like I'm not against TypeScript, like don't get me wrong. It's just that for me, like TypeScript never felt like natural, you know. It never felt like part of the original JavaScript. It's like, and making it work with libraries that don't support type definitions can be a bit awkward. And it's like a lot of toolings that you need to do to get it to work. But I mean, the good thing is like Babel 7 like supports this right now. So if you use TypeScript, it's gonna get better, and I might consider like this in the future. So I've been attending like KLJS meetup since April last year. So maybe some of you can relate, like you know, we've all been there. Like I was initially lured by the attraction of free pizzas, but then like so I came for free pizzas, but I stayed for the community, and I've learned like a lot, and I've gained a lot from these meetups since then, and that's why I'm still here. But I'm just kidding. So I can do ops, but I don't really like it. So here's also a little nugget or tidbit about myself. Like I didn't really tell anyone, and I'm surprised if like any of you would know, because like I just joined the committee late last year, and so far I mean, I've been trying like to, you know, find a topic that I can share so I can make some, you know, contribution. But it's not so easy when you're doing like for me personally, I do like really mainstream stuff like React, vanilla JavaScript, Webpack. Like there's nothing interesting to talk about. I don't use style components. Like I feel CSS is still the best. So maybe in the future I can talk a little bit about like writing your own Webpack configuration or server-side rendering, because I think that's something most people are very scared to do on their own. But I've been doing a little bit of that, so you'll see. So to the meat of today's topic, like what is gRPC? I mean, what is this like some random bunch of alphabets that like I know like some smart people here would say, oh, that's remote procedure call, right? And here's what it stands for. So like, I'm not gonna read it out. Like I'm sure you can read it, not at the risk of making myself sound absurd, but it's an interesting fact that this thing is called a recursive acronym. I didn't know until I was researching on this topic. So gRPC stands for gRPC, Remote Procedure Call. And the biggest thing that differentiates gRPC and normal RPC is it uses protocol buffers, or protobuf for short. And thanks to protocol buffers, it can support more than 10 programming languages, and it is asynchronous by nature, as well as being, you know, performance first. But here's the thing that I think for most people would be why you would want to choose gRPC over like let's say traditional REST API or JSON over HTTP, that is, it supports streams. So I know that some people might say that the latest Node.js supports streams. I haven't been using it. I haven't tried it yet, but I think I would assume that it would not be as polished as gRPC streams at this point. But it's hard to say, and when there's not many people using it yet, it's hard to give, you know, a solid answer whether it's good or not. But people have been using gRPC streams like for a while now. Like Docker uses gRPC, Kubernetes uses gRPC, and if you dabble with cryptocurrency, a lot of the cryptocurrency stuff, they use gRPC. So I mentioned protocol buffers just now, and to be honest, like protocol buffers is a topic that deserves, you know, a talk of its own because there's so much details to it. But because of protobuf synergy with gRPC, and I feel like I have to touch a little on this topic because although gRPC consists of two parts, first the gRPC protocol, the second the serialization part. You don't actually have to use protocol buffers, but the reason you want to use protocol buffers and the reason everyone's using gRPC right now is because of protocol buffers. And because of this, you can like support the more than 10 programming languages that I mentioned earlier. So in short, protocol buffers is, as mentioned on their website, is Google's attempt at making a better XML or a better like interactive data language, a better IDL, like on the general. I mean, I'm sure all of you have seen XML files, right? Like XML was created to like have a structured like data file. And if you have a lot of data in your XML, it's almost impossible to read unless you parse it, use something to, you know, make it pretty print it. But if you know any like programming languages or JavaScript, like this will immediately be like comfortable to you. And as you can see, it's very easy to define APIs. You just have to name your API, name what it accepts, what it returns, and you can see it's very simple. Anybody can do this, and it is better than XML or other like serialization techniques in the sense it serializes it into binary, so it compresses better. It takes less space, and you can send it over with less bandwidth. And these numbers is what they use. Right now, there's only like one field for each structure, but if you have more fields, you have 1, 2, 3, and this is what they use to make it fast. And the way it works is because it serializes into binary, which is all 1, 0, 0, 1 numbers. In short, like they use these numbers to identify the fields, so it traverses through the fields like quickly. So as I say, like protobuf is like super easy to use to define APIs. So before I'd like to show you something that you might find familiar. Does this look familiar to you? Like, does any of this look familiar to you? Because if you know, and anybody care to take a guess? Yes, somebody like reverse engineered, like I didn't check, I didn't find out how they did it, but they reverse engineered the Pokemon Go's protocol buffers, and this is how you end up with all these like Pokédex like hacks and stuff like that. that help you find Pokemon, because it's so easy. Like even if you have like zero idea of what the API looks like, if you look at this, everything is so obvious, right? Like you don't need a documentation. One look at it, you know this is an integer, and if you can put comments, if you name your stuff right, it's so easy. Okay, so this is why I think you should consider like gRPC over like normal HTTP plus JSON combination. Like what I showed you just now, you don't need to publish an API. So typically what you would do, especially for those people who like publishes like a public API, what you would do is you would first publish a documentation, like how to implement this API, what field it accepts, what type of data it accepts. But for this, all you need is a protobuf, and you just have to like share your protocol buffer. Your client don't have to integrate themselves. They don't need to write their own fetch requests, Axios, or whatever you're using. You just have to download the protocol buffer, generate a client stub, and bam, that's it. Second, streams. And why stream is good for you is like this. For example, you need to like deliver like a huge like data like to your client. So if you use HTTP or JSON, what you have to do is you have to load everything in memory, and you send it to your client all in one go. So this way it's gonna take a lot of memory. But if you use streams, you can send part by part, and this way you can keep your memory usage low and make your server more efficient, responsive. And you also get like shorter time to first display or time to first byte, whichever your metric is. And the protocol buffers. So as I mentioned just now, protocol buffer offers way better like serialization and compression, especially compared to JSON, which is basically string, like UTF-8. And it's also easy to create new endpoints. So as you can see, look at it again just now, like to add a new API, it's just as simple as adding a line, and that's it. You only have to use protocol buffers to generate a new client and server stub, and both server backend and frontend guys can like start working like simultaneously. Okay, so if protocol buffers if gRPC is really as good as what I've said, then I think the first question that popped into your mind is why isn't that like many people using it? Like why is everyone still using REST, right? So the simple reason is the browser support is not there yet, but they are Google has promised, or at least that's what they say on their GitHub site. Like they have an announcement by October this year, which is like 2 months from now. So I'm not sure what the announcement is. They're being pretty vague about it. But yeah, this is the reason why. So this is the reason why there's no support for browsers, even though it supports pretty much any language that you can think of that people actually use, like Python, Java, C++, and for our case we use Go. And so like some smart people would say, but browsers do support trailers. And here's another explanation. Like, although browsers do support trailers, like the API to like interact with it with HTTP it's not so not so complete yet. So they're still like finalizing things, and hopefully when all the needed APIs are there, then this will officially be available for browsers. So if there is no like gRPC for web browsers, then what do we use? So for us, we use gRPC web implementation by Improbable Engineering. So it's not to be confused by gRPC web by Google. Google actually has an implementation for the browsers. Like I can show it to you. So this is the official implementation, but it is still beta release, and they expect to announce a general available by October 2018. So it's still like a little bit experimental nature at this point. So you may ask, then why don't we try this first? But reason we went with Improbable version is pretty simple. Like they have more GitHub stars, like, so it must be better, right? Like, but I mean, to be honest, I didn't make this decision. Like my colleague did it. So yeah, that's the implementation that we went with. But the good thing about this is it's actually a same API implementation. So in theory, when the real thing comes out, and if we decide to go with the real thing, all we have to do is just change the import, and in theory it should work, but we don't know yet, and hopefully that's the case. And yeah, so with the Improbable implementation, there is no client-side streaming support, and the reason that I mentioned just now. There is no full readable stream support in browsers yet. So which means out of the four RPCs that gRPC support, first is unary, which is one request, one response, exactly like HTTP, which is what we've been using all this while. And server-side streaming, this is the one you should be interested in. Thirdly, there is client-side streaming and bidirectional streaming that's not supported. So yeah. So there are no limitations with the current Improbable implementation. So for browsers that don't support like readable streams yet, it uses XHR as a fallback. So the problem with XHR is if you use Stream, for example, if you load a lot of data, it will store everything in memory and make things unstable. And this, for me, the sad thing is like it's like even Edge, like Microsoft Edge, like supports like readable stream since the, version 13, and Firefox only recently implemented it, and it's still like hidden behind flags. So like you can say that users can enable it, but if users don't even read your terms of agreement, like there's no way they will do this. So yeah. The not so nice part about gRPC is not as fun to test. Like if you've been writing like REST API, you'd probably be like used to running Postman or something similar. And because it's a URL, you can even type in your browser URL and check the response. But for gRPC, the only way right now is to write a client, a gRPC client, or yeah, basically that's the only way I know. And so if you need a business idea, maybe you can write a Postman for gRPC. Maybe if gRPC like explode in the future, you'll be making good money. Like nobody knows. And and as I mentioned earlier, because of its experimental nature. Yeah, I guess that's it. What time is it? Okay, we still have time. So I think like you have, so like for most people, let's say if you want to write use gRPC on the web browser, you might be not so like not you probably not be not so nice to try it right now. But if you're doing any of the following, which I have to mention that gRPC does support Node.js. So if you write like if you write microservices with Node.js, like or with anything else, you definitely should like give this a go, because I mean basically Google uses gRPC, Pokemon Go uses gRPC, YouTube uses gRPC, Kubernetes, Docker. I mean, you have no excuse not to try it. Like it's if these people use it, it must be good. Like trust that. So you can maybe you want to use it if you don't feel like writing client libraries. So the good thing about protocol buffers, as I mentioned just now, you can just generate the client stuff and you can ship it to customer as SDK, and they can just like import it into their current code and call it straight away. It's that simple. Okay, so I guess we have a little time. I can show you how you can generate. I mean, the best part about gRPC, which is protocol buffers.
Make your phone laugh.
Yeah, I'm using some funky text editor, so mind me.
It's the best.
Okay, so like, let's say if you have a protocol buffer, oh shit. Okay, so let's say if you have a protocol buffer over here, all you have to do is you run this command, and if you look at it, I can at one time I can generate the JavaScript output, the TypeScript type definitions, as well as Go servers, the server stuff, all in one go with just this little amount of code. You can generate all of that. So let's go ahead and do this. So you only have to run a code once, and so I specify to output all the code to a generated folder. So you can see now you have all the client stops or the server stops that you need, and you can see it generates your JavaScript code, your your TypeScript definitions, as well as your, like for our backend we use Golang, so the code is there. Like that's it. Like you can start using all of this, and this is what so all you have to do is just like implement, like you can just write the code over here, like in Go. If you didn't notice, you just have to write your like code in Go and the client part in JS. So yeah, and just like this, you already created a server and client. So if you don't like Go, for example, you want to use a Python backend, you can generate a Python server stop, or you want to use Node.js at the backend, but you want to use, let's say, you don't deliver it for the browser, you want to use it on an Android app like Pokemon Go. You can do this. So for me, like if you write a lot of APIs, this is like a no-brainer. Like the performance-wise, it's similar to REST API. It's not. I wouldn't tell you if you're using if you're writing like REST API on Node or Go. I wouldn't tell you that if you switch to protobuf, you get like magical performance increase overnight. If you want that, then maybe you're writing like a server with Node.js. You can consider switching to Go. Then that will net you a performance increase. But other than that, like what gRPC and protocol buffers really is for is to help you write APIs easily. So that's it for my talk. Thank you. Yeah.
Why not cap and photo?
Sorry?
Why not cap and photo? Captain.
Captain Proto? Captain Proto. I don't know how to answer that. I've never heard of it. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe going on top of that, isn't Captain Proto basically another virtual buffer kind of thing?
Yeah, but it doesn't have the serializer and deserializer type.
Then you really answer your own question, right?
I know, but why does your? I think it's a preference.
I mean, like I said, like if Docker is using this, Kubernetes is using it. I mean, don't you feel like you want to try and have some of this like goodness? Like what other validation do you need, right? Like who uses Captain Proto? Like I don't know. Captain Proto.
Going back to that, so supposedly this is actually much better than protobufs as far as
as I mentioned earlier, like there is this gRPC protocol as well as this serialization part. You can swap out either one, but basically everybody uses gRPC for this, like, and or as far as I know, most people, if they use it, they use both. So yeah, you can switch out.
The thing about gRPC is the transport, the two-way is actually powered by HTTP2. So it relies a lot on HTTP2 to do this thing.
Yeah. So because like Google created this before there's HTTP2, it's speedy. Like Google made Speedy, and they also invented like gRPC to take advantage of it. So that's why like a lot of the good things that Speedy brings, it's all being fully taken advantage by Protobuf. The gRPC.
But in your case, you're using the gRPC web bridge, so you don't benefit from all those nice features because you're over HTTP1. And so that might explain some of the performance features that you're experiencing. Because if, let's say, you could have full nice support of gRPC in the browser, then you benefit of all the compression and all the nice stuff of HTTP2 and
Yeah, that might be right, but I don't know, like Google said they have like announcement to make. So hopefully when the official thing comes out, I don't know what the future holds, but you know, one can be optimistic. And I've read the documentation of the current implementation that we're using. So it probably cannot take full advantage of all the HTTP2 features, but as far as the gRPC part goes, like it does like take advantage of all the gRPC features, because basically they just mock the part in the HTTP server. Like in the response handling part, they use like gRPC for it. But yeah, so you might lose some benefits of protocol buffer and HTTP2, but it's a compromise. And as I say, using this is not, if you use this, it's definitely not because of performance, because even for GraphQL, it's not more performant than REST API. And I would say the complications that you bring in with GraphQL might not be worth, I mean, the time you spend like implementing it, it might not be worth like over REST API. But for gRPC, the use case is simple. If you publish the public API, you publish SDK for clients to use, you can just send a protocol buffer, and anybody can generate a client for their own language. If you like Python, you write Python. If you write C++, you write C++. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, sorry. I was cut you off. I need to end this.
Alright, thanks for all the speakers. And are there any hiring shoutouts? I know CoinGecko has one. Yeah, hiring React Native developer.
No, we also have a shout
Yes, CoinGecko.com is hiring a React Native developer, so come speak to me if you're interested.
And so like as you can see, like in blockchain labs, we use a lot of experimental stuff. So like you know, I heard this thing from, I mean, my friend once told me this. It is more fun to do boring things with interesting technology than to do like interesting things with boring technology. So if you're interested in working with interesting stuff, or working remotely interests you, we're hiring. So like you can send an email to jobs@stackninja.com. Yeah. That's yeah.
Anyone else? Alright. I think there's still some food over there.